Shalom, Aleichem, peace be upon you, and welcome back to the broadcast. I'm Shawn. Today, we're looking at this week's Torah portion, which happens to be titled Vayetze. Let me give you the Torah portion summary real quick. The seventh reading from the book of Genesis is named Vayetze, which means, and he went out. The title comes from the first verse of the reading, which says, and Jacob went out from Beersheba. This portion tells the story of Jacob's flight from his brother Esau, his vision at Bethel, his employment with his uncle Laban, and his marriage to the two sisters, Rachel and Leah. Jacob's double marriage results in a baby-bearing contest that gives him 11 sons. At the end of the portion, Jacob leaves Laban and returns to the land of Canaan, but not before Laban tries to stop him. So just a quick outline of what we're going to be covering today. You've got Jacob's dream at Bethel, which we're going to talk about to start the show here. You've got Jacob meets Rachel, Jacob marries Leah, or Laban's daughters, Jacob prospers at Laban's expense, Jacob flees with his family and flocks, Laban overtakes Jacob, and then Laban and Jacob make a covenant. Now this morning I'm going to be reading from a different translation today known as the Hebrew Bible, a translation with commentary by Robert Alter. And it's a beautiful collection, beautiful commentary. It's divided up into three parts. The Torah, like 3 volumes, the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. And I just wanted to check it out, so that's what I'm going to be reading from this morning. And I'll give you an example of how the commentary works in this particular piece of work here. Starting with, we're going to be talking about Jacob's ladder, which is really the first part of this whole story. So let me read that first few verses here to get us started. I'm going to make the connection that I like to make, that I think is obvious, and then I'm going to give you this little snippet of commentary, but then the rest of our reading this morning is going to be primarily just the reading itself with very little commentary or interruption. All right, let's begin. This portion is Genesis 28, verse 10 through 32, verse 3. Starting with verse 10. And Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. And he came upon a certain place, and he stopped there for the night. For the sun had set, and he had took one of the stones of the place, and put it at his head, and he lay down in that place. And he dreamed, and look, a ramp was set against the ground, with the top reaching the heavens. And look, the messengers of God were going up and down, going up and coming down it. And look, the Lord was poised over him, and he said, I am the Lord. I, the Lord, am the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land which you lie, to you will I give it, and to your seed. So please note, we have the famous story of Jacob's ladder, right? It's translated as ramp here. And here's the commentary that he puts in this Bible, which that's all it is. It's the Hebrew Bible, and in commentary related to Hebrew words. And so he says ramp. The reason why I translated it ramp as opposed to what you typically see, ladder. Here's his reasoning. The Hebrew term occurs only here. Although its etymology is doubtful, the traditional rendering of ladder is unlikely. As has often been observed, the reference to both its top reaching the heavens and the gate of heaven uses phrases associated with the Mesopotamian ziggurat, and so the structure envisioned is probably a vast ramp with terraced landings. There is a certain appropriateness in the Mesopotamian motif, given the destination of Jacob's journey. Jacob in general is represented as a border crosser, a man of liminal experience. Here, then, in his return trip, when he is confronted by Laban, and in his nocturnal encounter at the ford of the Jabbok. So he's saying it's very likely what's being described here is more like a ramp rather than a ladder. And so what the Bible describes is you've got this ramp or ladder reaching into heaven. And Jacob sees the angels of the Lord kind of going up and down it. And the interesting thing is that this is more than just a dream. And there's obviously a spiritual significance to this, a foreshadowing to Messiah, which Jesus himself makes the claim. If we go to John chapter 1, verse 49 through 51, the Gospel of John. And Nathanael answered and said unto him, Rabbi, thou art the Son of God, thou art the King of Israel. And Jesus answered and said unto him, Because I said unto thee, I saw you under the fig tree, believest thou? Thou shalt see greater things than these. And he saith unto him, Verily, verily, I say unto you, hereafter ye shall see heaven opened, and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. It is my opinion that what Jesus is claiming here is that he is Jacob's ladder. He is the bridge between here and the gates of heaven. And of course, we know there's only one access, right? There's only one bridge. There's only one ladder or way into the kingdom of God. And that is through the Lord Jesus, through the Son of God. And so we go all the way back to Genesis. And Jacob is seeing this ramp, this ladder. And we find out later that has some pretty significant spiritual consequences, doesn't it? All right. I just wanted to make that connection for you and read you a little snippet from this commentary that I have. Now let's move forward and get through this story. It's very, very interesting. Let's begin. I'm going to just start right over with the beginning of the portion. And Jacob left Beersheba, and he set out for Haran. And he came upon a certain place, and he stopped there for the night. And the sun had set. And he took one of the stones of the place, and he put it at his head, and he lay down in that place, and he dreamed. Look, a ramp was set against the ground, with its top reaching the heavens. And look, messengers of God were going up and coming down. And look, the Lord was poised over him, and he said, I, the Lord, am the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land which you lie I will give to you and to your seed. And your seed shall be like the dust of the earth. And you shall burst forth to the west and to the east, and the north and south, and all the clans of the earth shall be blessed through you and through your seed. And look, I am with you, and I will guard you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done that which I have spoken you. And Jacob awoke from his sleep, and he said, Indeed, the Lord is in this place, and I did not know. And he was afraid, and he said, How fearsome is this place! This can be but the house of God, and this is the gate of the heavens. And Jacob rose early in the morning, and he took the stones that he had put at his head, and he set it as a pillar, and poured oil all over it, over its top. And he called the name of that place Bethel, though the name of the town before he had been Luz. And Jacob made a vow, saying, If the Lord God be with me, and guard me on this way that I am going, and give me bread, and to eat, and clothing to wear, and I return safely to my father's house, then the Lord will be my God. And this stone that I set as a pillar will be a house of God, and everything that you give me, I will surely tithe it to you. And Jacob lifted his feet, and he went on to the land of the Easterners. And he saw, and look, there was a well in the field, and look, 3 flocks of sheep were lying beside it. For from that well they would water the flocks, and the stone was big on the mouth of the well. And when all the flocks were gathered there, they would roll the stone from the mouth of the well, and would water the sheep, and put back the stone in its place on the mouth of the well. And Jacob said to them, My brothers, where are you from? And they said, We are from Haran. And he said to them, Do you know Laban, son of Nahor? And they said, "We know him." And he said to them, "Is he well?" And they said, "He is well, and look, Rachel his daughter is coming with the sheep." And he said, "Look, this day is still long. It is not time to gather in the herd. Water the sheep and take them to graze." And they said, "We cannot until the flocks have gathered, and the stone is rolled from the mouth of the well, and water the sheep." And he was still speaking with them when Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a sheep herder. And it happened when Jacob saw Rachel, daughter of Laban his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban his mother's brother, that he stepped forward and rolled the stone from the mouth of the well, and watered the sheep of Laban his mother's brother. And Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted his voice and wept. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's kin, and that he was Rebekah's son. And she ran and she told her father. And it happened when Laban heard the report of Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran toward him, embraced him, and kissed him, and brought him to his house. And he recounted to Laban all the things. And Laban said to him, "Indeed, you are my bone and my flesh." And he stayed with him a month's time. And Laban said to Jacob, "Because you are my kin, should you serve me for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be." And Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger, Rachel. Leah's eyes were tender, but Rachel was comely in features and comely to look at. And Jacob loved Rachel. And he said, "I will serve 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter." And Laban said, "Better I should give her to you than to give her to another man." Please note. So what we have here is, we got Leah. She has pretty eyes, but she's otherwise average looking. Rachel is beautiful. And so Jacob obviously is fond of her. And he tells his uncle Laban, "I'll work for you in exchange for your daughter Rachel," which Laban agrees. And it's what's getting ready to happen to me, or happen, I think, is a beautiful love story, really. But Jacob's willing to work 7 years for Rachel. But what we're going to see is God's attitude about how Leah is perceived and viewed is one of not being pleased with that. And as a result, we're going to see Rachel struggle to produce children, where Leah has an open womb blessed by the Lord, and a majority of Jacob's sons are going to come from her. All right, so Laban agrees to this deal. He says, "Stay with me." And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed in his eyes but a few days in his love for her. That to me, that is just beautiful language. Jacob worked 7 years of courting Rachel. That's a long time to court a woman. But to him, it seemed like a few days. It just went by. It was just not burdensome because of how much he loved her. And Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife, for the time is done, and let me come to bed with her." And Laban gathered all the men of the place and made a feast. And when evening came, he took Leah, his daughter, and brought her to Jacob. And he came to bed with her. And Laban gave Zilpah, his slave girl, to Leah, his daughter, as her slave girl. It's an interesting translation, isn't it? Obviously, this person, or this translator, views that word that's typically translated as like a servant or handmaid, as actual slave girl. And when morning came, look, she was Leah. And he said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served you? And why have you deceived me?" And Laban said, "It is not done thus in our place to give the younger girl before the firstborn. Finish out the bridal week of this one, and we shall give you the other as well for the service you render me for still another 7 years." So please note, I have to point out something. Remember a little bit earlier, just a few, 10 verses or so, 15 verses or so, Jacob recounts what had took place back home, which we would presume he's telling the story of how he had to flee from Esau because he deceived his brother and his father into giving him the blessing. And Laban says, "You are definitely flesh of my flesh and bone of my bone." Like, Laban's like, okay, we're definitely related. Interestingly enough, Laban commits a similar act, right, of deception, tricking his nephew into sleeping with Leah, which would have formally bound them, made them married, by bringing her in the night instead of Rachel, the one he worked for. I just find that an interesting connection. They are two peas in a pod. And this kind of behavior continues on with both of them. And so Jacob did, and when he was finished out the bridal week, for one, he gave him Rachel, his daughter, as a wife. And so Jacob ended up having to work 14 years for Rachel. 14 years. And Laban gave Rachel, his daughter, Bilhah, his slave girl, as her slave girl. And he came to bed with Rachel too, and indeed loved Rachel more than Leah. And he served him still another 7 years. And the Lord saw that Leah was despised, and he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. And Leah conceived and bore a son, and called his name Reuben. For she said, "Yes, the Lord has seen my sufferings, for now my husband will love me." So please note, isn't that just kind of like a sad statement? Well, I'm pregnant now, so now my husband will love me. And she conceived again and bore a son. And she said, "Yes, the Lord has heard that I was despised, and he has given me this one too." And she called his name Simeon. And she conceived again and bore a son, and said, "This time at last my husband will join me. For I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore his name is called Levi." And she conceived again and bore a son. And she said, "This time I sing praise to the Lord." Therefore she called his name Judah. And she ceased bearing children. So please note, before we're too harsh on Jacob for loving Rachel more, it's important to note that that was his feeling to begin with. He was swindled into marrying Leah. Obviously God's ordained plan, as we have these 4 sons coming from Leah, but each time she's thinking that now she will become his favorite, or the one he goes to, because she's conceiving children. Chapter 30, and Rachel saw that she had borne no children to Jacob, and Rachel was jealous of her sister, and she said to Jacob, "Give me sons, for if you don't, I am a dead woman." And Jacob was incensed with Rachel, and he said, "Am I instead of God? Who has denied you the fruit of your womb?" And she said, "Here is my slave girl Bilhah. Come to bed with her, that she may give birth on my knees, so that I too shall be built up through her." And she gave him Bilhah, her slave girl, as a wife. And Jacob came to bed with her. And Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. And Rachel said, "God granted me my cause. Yes, he heard my voice, and he has given me a son." Therefore she called his name Dan. And Bilhah, Rachel's slave girl, conceived again and bore a second son to Jacob. And Rachel said, "I fear some grapplings, and I have grappled with my sister, and yes, I won out." And she called his name Naphtali. And Leah saw that she had increased bearing children, and she took Zilpah, her slave girl, and gave her to Jacob as a wife. And Zilpah, Leah's slave girl, bore Jacob a son. And Leah said, "Good luck has come." And she called his name Gad. And Zilpah, Leah's slave girl, bore a second son to Jacob. And Leah said, "What good fortune! For the girls have acclaimed me fortunate." And she called his name Asher. So this battle between Leah and Rachel continues over who's going to bear the most children. And now they start trying to bear children through their handmaids. So Jacob now has 4 wives. As if 2 wasn't enough, now he has 4. And of course, he has 2 children with each of the handmaids as well. All right, let's continue on verse 14 here. And Reuben went out during the wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field, and he brought them to Leah his mother. And Rachel said to Leah, "Give me, pray, some of the mandrakes of your son." And she said, "Is it not enough you have taken my husband, and now you would take the mandrakes of my son?" And Rachel said, "Then let him lie with you tonight in return for the mandrakes of your son." So please note, obviously, Jacob spends most of his nights with Rachel. Mandrakes. What are we dealing with here? Here's the commentary from this study Bible. As in other, later cultures, these plants with tomato-shaped fruit were used for medicinal purposes and were thought to be an aphrodisiac, and also to have a virtue of promoting fertility, which seems to be what Rachel has in mind. Rachel doesn't bore any children, right? She has the two that really aren't hers because they were from her handmaid. Reuben comes back with these mandrakes. Rachel recognizes what they are and what the medicinal purposes are for them, so she's trying to make a deal with Leah. Let me have those, and then tonight you can have Jacob. This is the family dynamic. And Jacob came from the field, and in the evening, and Leah went out to meet him and said, "With me you will come to bed, for I have clearly hired you with the mandrakes of my son." And he lay with her that night. And God heard Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. And Leah said, "God has given me my wages, because I gave my slave girl to my husband." And she called his name Ishchar. And Leah conceived again and bore a sixth son to Jacob. And Leah said, "God has granted me goodly gift. This time my husband will exalt me, for I have borne him 6 sons. And she called his name Zebulun. And afterwards she bore a daughter, and she called her name Dinah. So please note, Leah provides 6 children for, really 7. 6 boys, and then the daughter Dinah. And God remembered Rachel, and God heard her, and he opened her womb, and she conceived and bore a son. And she said, "God has taken away my shame." And she called his name Joseph, which is to say, "May the Lord add me another son." And it happened, when Rachel bore Joseph, that Jacob said to Laban, "Send me off, that I may go to my place and to my land, and give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, that I may go, for you know the service that I have done you." And Laban said to him, If I have found favor in your eyes, I have prospered, and the Lord has blessed me because of you." And he said, "Name your wages, that I may give them." And he said to him, "You know how I have served you, and your livestock has fared with me. For little you had before my time has swollen to a multitude, and the Lord has blessed you on my account. And now I shall too provide for my household." And he said, "What shall I give you?" And Jacob said, "You need give me nothing, if you will do this thing for me. Let me go back to herd your flocks and watch them. And I shall pass through all your flocks today, and remove them from every spotted, speckled animal, and every dark-colored sheep, and speckled and spotted among the goats. And that will be my wages. Then my honesty will bear witness for me in the days to come, when you go over my wages. Whatever is not spotted and speckled among the goats, and dark-colored among the sheep, shall be accounted stolen by me." And Laban said, "Let it be just as you say." So please note, Jacob wants to go off on his own. He wants to take his wives and his children, and he wants to do his own thing. Laban's not really wanting that to happen, because Laban has increased significantly since Jacob has arrived. And so he doesn't want he doesn't want that blessing to fall away. So again, they're kind of trying to manipulate each other. And Jacob comes up with this plan. I'm going to keep you keep all the pure goats and sheep, right? The ones that are spotless. I'll take all the speckled ones and the spot ones. And as we're going to see, that becomes a deception, as well as he will intentionally do things to make them come out that way. And this is just the character of Jacob and of Laban. Continue on. And he removed on that day the spotted and speckled he-goats, and all the bridle and speckled she-goats, every one that had white on it, and every dark-collared one among the sheep. And he gave them over to his sons, and he put 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob. And while Jacob herded the remaining flocks of Laban. And Jacob took for himself moist rods of poplar and almond and plane tree, and peeled white strips in them, laying here the white on the rods. And he stood on the rods as he peered through the troughs in the water channels from which the flocks came to drink, opposite the flocks which went into the heat, and they came to drink. And the flocks went into the heat at the rods of the flocks, and bore brindled, spotted, and speckled young. So Jacob has found a way to make them come out speckled. And the sheep Jacob kept apart. He placed them facing the spotted and all the dark-collared in Laban's flocks, and he set himself herds of his own, and he did not set them with Laban's flocks. And so, whenever the vigorous of the flocks went into the heat, Jacob put the rods in full sight of the flocks in the troughs for them to go in the heat by the rods. And for the weakling of the flocks he did not put them. And so feeble ones went to Laban, and the vigorous ones to Jacob. And the man swelled up mightily, and he had many flocks, and female and male slaves, and camels and donkeys. Chapter 31. And he heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob has taken everything of our fathers, and from what belonged to our father he has made his wealth. And Jacob saw Laban's face, and look, it was not disposed towards him as in times past. And the Lord said to Jacob, Return to the land of your fathers, to your birthplace, and I will be with you. And Jacob sent, and he called Rachel and Leah out in the field and his flocks, and he said to them, I see your father's face, that it is not disposed towards me as in times past. But the God of my father has been with me. And you know that with all my strength I have served your father, but your father has tricked me and switched my wages 10 times over. Yet God has not let him do me harm. So please note, obviously Jacob is doing some manipulation, right, with the sheep and the goats. But here we find out something that Laban has been doing, which is he's been switching up Jacob's wages. Jacob says 10 times over. He's continually messing with me, manipulating my pay. So we have this back and forth with Laban and Jacob that's been going on since the beginning. This back and forth of deceiving one another. He says, If thus said, the spotted ones will be your wages, and all the flocks bore spotted ones. And if he said, the bridled ones will be on your wages, and the flocks bore bridle ones. And God has reclaimed your father's livestock and given it to me. And so, at the time when the flocks were in the heat, I raised my eyes, and I saw in a dream, and look, the rams mourning, the flocks were bridled, spotted, and speckled. And God's messenger said to me in a dream, Jacob. And I said, Here I am. And he said, Raise your eyes, pray, and see. All the rams mounting the flocks are spotted, bridled, and speckled. For I have seen that all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God who appeared to you at Bethel, where you were anointed at a pillar and made a vow. Now rise, leave this land, and return to the land of your birthplace. And Rachel and Leah answered, and they said to him, Do we still have any share in the inheritance of our father's house? Why, we have been counted by him as strangers, for he has sold us, and he has wholly consumed our money. For whatever wealth God has reclaimed for our father is yours and our children's. And so whatever God has said to you, do. And Jacob rose, and he bore off his children and wives on camels, and he drove all of his livestock and all of his substance that he had acquired, his property and his livestock that he had acquired in Padam Aram, to go to Isaac his father in the land of Canaan. And Laban had gone to shear his flocks. And Rachel stole the household gods that were her father's, and Jacob deceived Laban an Aramean, and not telling him that he was fleeing, and he fled and all that was his. And he rose, and he crossed the Euphrates, and he set his face towards the high country of Gilead. And it was told to Laban on the 3rd day that Jacob had fled. And he took his kinsman with him, and he pursued him 7 days' journey, and overtook him in the high country of Gilead. And God came to Laban the Aramean, in the night dream, and he said to him, Watch yourself, lest you speak evil to Jacob, either good or evil. And Laban caught up with Jacob, and Jacob had pitched his tent in the height, and Laban had pitched with his kinsmen in the high country of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, What have you done, deceiving me, and driving my daughters like captives with the sword? Why did you flee in stealth and deceive me, and not tell me? I would have sent you off with festives and songs and timbrels and lyre, and you did not let me kiss my sons and my daughters. Oh, you have played the fool. My hand has the might to do you harm, but the God of your father said to me last night, Watch yourself, lest you speak to Jacob either good or evil. And so you had to go because you longed so much for your father's house, but why did you steal my gods? So basically we have some idols that Laban had. Rachel took them for whatever reason. Maybe there was some nostalgia or something, but he's wondering where they are. Jacob has no idea. And Jacob answered and he said to Laban, For I was afraid, and I thought you would rob me of your daughters. With whomever you find your gods, that person shall not live. Before our kinsmen, make recognition of what is yours with me, and take it. But Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. And Laban came into Jacob's tent, and into Leah's tent, and into the tent of the two slaves girl, and he found nothing. And he came out of Leah's tent, and he went into Rachel's tent, and Rachel had taken the household gods and put them in the camel cushion, and sat on them. And Laban rummaged through the whole tent, and found nothing. And she said to her father, Let not my lord be increased, that I am unable to rise before you, for the way of women is upon me. And he searched, and he did not find the household gods. And Jacob was incensed and voiced his grievance to Laban. And Jacob spoke out, and he said to Laban, What is my crime? What is my guilt, that you should race after me? Though you rummage through all my things, what have you found of all your household things? Set it here before my kin and yours, and they shall determine between us two. These 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and your she-goats did not lose their young. The rams of your flock I have not eaten. What was torn up by beast I brought not to you. I bore the loss from my hand, and you seek it. What was stolen by day and stolen by night? Often by day the parching heat ate me up, and the frost in the night, and the sleep was a stranger to my eyes. These 20 years in your household I have served you, 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flocks, and you switched my wages 10 times over. Were it not that the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the terror of Isaac was with me, you would have sent me off empty-handed. My suffering and the toil of my hands God has seen, and last night he determined in my favor. And Laban answered and said to Jacob, The daughters are my daughters, and the sons are my sons, and the flocks are my flocks, and all that you see is mine. Yet for my daughters what can I do now? And for their sons who they bore. And so, come let us make a pact, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me. And Jacob took a stone, and he set up a pillar, and Jacob said to his kinsmen, Gather stones. And they fetched stones, and made a mound, and they ate thereon at the mound. And Laban called it Yegar Sahudatha, but Jacob called it Gal-ed. And Laban said, This mound is a witness between you and me, this day. Therefore it was called Gal-ed. And Mizpah. For he said, May the Lord look out between you and me, and when we are out of reach of each other's sight. Should you abuse my daughters, and should you take wives besides my daughters, though no one else is present? See, God is a witness between you and me. And Laban said to Jacob, Look, this mound, and look, the pillar that I cast between you and me, witness be mound and witness the pillar, that I will not cross over to you past this mound, and you will not cross over to me past this mound, and past the pillar, for harm. May the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the gods of their fathers, judge between us. And Jacob swore by the terror of his father Isaac, and Jacob offered sacrifices at the height, called to his kinsmen to eat bread, and they ate bread, and passed the night on the height. 3 more verses. Chapter 32. And Laban rose early in the morning, and he kissed his sons and his daughters, and he blessed them. And Laban went off to return to his place. And Jacob had gone on his way, and the messengers of God accosted him. And Jacob said when he saw them, "This is God's camp." And he called the name of that place Mahanaim. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother in the land of Seir, the steppe of Edom. And he charged them, saying, I'm reading too far. So it actually ends with Jacob saying, "And Jacob went on his ways, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, 'This is God's camp.' And so he called that name of that place Mahanaim." That is the end of our portion. That was a long one, and my first time reading from this translation. And so my conclusion, just real quick because I need to wrap things up, is that it has some great commentary value, but the translation itself I did not enjoy through that reading. I found it more challenging to read that translation, just the way the words were put together, as opposed to reading the Hallelujah Scriptures, which is filled with Hebraic words, and maybe it's just practice, and I'm accustomed to reading the King James, I'm accustomed to reading the Hallelujah Scriptures, not so much with this. But there you have it. Great commentary, worth having as part of research if you're interested in that. I put links in the description. I don't get paid or anything for this. This is just something that I found interesting that I wanted to investigate. Nonetheless, we're 40 minutes into this podcast this morning. I pray you were blessed in spite of it not being the best reading, but I pray that you were blessed by it at any rate. Thanks for listening. Peace be upon you, and God bless.